let us pray. Team, maybe that's in a prayer.
In the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Our Father, who art in heaven,
Hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen.
Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Father.
By the way, I told you to buy The Godless Delusion. Has anyone bought it? So you don't want to be delusional? Please buy it, okay? If we can get it through our bookstore here, if like we
They took all the books.
write down the names, pardon?
They took all the books out of the gift shop.
They sure did, huh? They
Oh, yeah, they don't got no more.
We'll bring the Godless Delusion, okay? Okay. So I don't know what's going on. So just so please buy the book, okay? It's gonna be.
Write it down.
Are you going to interpret it for us, Father?
No, really, this could be. I'm just thinking. Okay? This probably could be our next class on how to answer atheism,
Then we'll buy it.
because it's a very important thing today. Why? Because atheistic arguments sound very intelligent on the surface. They are dumb, okay? Arguments, but taking into account our day and time, the times we live in, they really sound very smart, okay? When you really, one's mind is not really philosophically trained. And that's why many of our children, when they go to colleges, they listen to this nonsense and they believe it. So when you study books like this, it's well written. Okay, Patrick Madrid and the other author. So it's well written. So when you study it, not only that you learn how to answer atheism, but you believe it, it also strengthens one's faith. Because as you know, all of us, without exception, the devil keeps trying to plant seeds of doubt into our minds. Is there really a God? Okay, will I go to heaven? When I die, what will happen? Maybe atheists may be true that there is really nothing beyond this world. Okay? And if there is nothing beyond this life, why am I restraining myself not to do whatever I want? So it will be a double loss if I die. I didn't enjoy life the way I wanted, and then there is nothing beyond life. What a waste. You see? So all those things come to mind, those kinds of doubt. So it's the arguments of atheism are well basically presented in the book, what they say, and they are well answered. Basically, when you read it, you think that, oh, it's an intelligent argument. But when the mind is philosophically trained, you just tear it apart and it comes to nothing. Okay, for example, just an example. Atheists, what do they basically boast about?
No.
They usually tell us, okay, they are telling us today that the smartest people are atheists. Okay, so why do they call themselves smart?
They think they know everything.
Because they possess knowledge. Okay? Okay, now just to think about this. If you take the atheistic worldview, we call it the naturalistic or the materialistic worldview, okay? How is knowledge possible? For us, Christians, how is knowledge possible?
Through that.
We know that knowledge, which is wisdom, intelligence, intelligence, is participation in divine intelligence. The order we see, okay, the way we look at a human being, mind, and the way right now that I'm communicating knowledge to you, okay, is because we believe that we have a soul that is immaterial. And therefore, we can exchange immaterial things because we have a soul which can internalize reality which is beyond mere matter elements. how can an atheist explain the possibility and existence of knowledge or intellect?
But Father, they have a soul too. Why can't they use it? Or do they use it the wrong way?
No, basically what we are saying that they reject God, God's existence. So how do they explain knowledge according to their world view that God doesn't exist? They claim to be smart people, they possess knowledge. But how do you possess knowledge according to their world view? And how do you communicate that knowledge to another? They would say that knowledge, what we call basically, knowledge intelligence, are simply brain cells, molecules. Brain cells and molecules, okay? So just firing off things, nothing more. So how are my brain cells and molecules transferred to you so that you may know what my brain cells and molecules are firing off? What is that process of transfer? How are they transferred to you so that you may comprehend and understand if it's just merely brain molecules and cells at work? They'll say what you call memory or whatever you call it, intelligence. They're simply, you can explain that materially, they're simply brain cells and molecules firing off.
So they don't believe in thought?
That's what atheism is, okay? That they don't believe in God. But when they say they don't believe in God, okay, there are so many things they can't explain in our day-to-day life. Okay, like knowledge. How do you possess knowledge? How do you acquire knowledge? Knowledge is not material. Okay, it's not a materialistic thing. So if only material things do exist, what you have to really admit logically is to deny the possibility of knowledge. But if knowledge is impossible, how can you even claim that there is no God? How do you know that if knowledge is impossible? But if knowledge is possible, how is it possible according to the atheistic worldview? Okay, so in the end, an atheist really lives as a Christian while denying the basis of what they live. So this book explains those things so well. Okay, it goes into detail. Okay? So probably we may look into that for our next class.
Does it define knowledge?
Pardon?
Does the book define knowledge?
Or it defines, well, the arguments of atheists, okay? And then it defines what basically knowledge is, okay? And how we Christians, according to our worldview, we say it's possible. But then the question they put to atheists, how do you explain the possibility of knowledge according to your worldview? And according to their worldview, it is practically impossible to explain the existence of intellect and knowledge. Okay?
The reason I ask is you can talk about knowledge, but if you don't define it, it's different.
Oh no, they don't presume, it's very philosophical. They explain things. Yes.
Somewhere my 12-year-old granddaughter started picking up some strange ideas. And she was talking to me about, she was worried that maybe God didn't exist and that atheism was right. And I thought for a minute, because, she's only 12, I don't know where she heard this. But I just said to her, well, don't worry about it, Jocelyn, because God exists whether you believe it or not. And she said, oh, okay.
Yes. But remember, she's only 12. She's going to receive more doses of atheism. So basically what happens with most atheists is this, especially those who have been Christians, but especially those who have been Catholic before, okay? They will tell you that, oh, I was, a Catholic before, but I came to the conclusion that God doesn't exist, okay? They came to the conclusion that God doesn't exist while they were in either grade school or high school. So basically, these people, they are intelligent, they may have a doctorate in physics or whatever. So it is a doctor of physics, but their level of understanding God or the faith is second grade. So now you have a doctor of physics asking a second grader a scientific question to answer it by way of second grade level of faith. So an atheist is second grade level of faith and he has a doctorate in physics. So you see, this same person at one level is a doctor of physics, and another level is second grade faith, understanding, level of faith. So how is a scientist, a physicist, going to answer questions about God with second grade level of knowledge? So see, that's the discrepancy with these atheists. Okay? So they're asking a question, a scientific question, to a second grader themselves to answer it in terms of faith. You can't. It's like Einstein asking a second grader about the first law of thermodynamics. A second grader is not going to answer it. They don't know. So if you invert those things, it's like an atheist asking a second grader, okay, about faith. He can't answer it until he pumps up his understanding of God to the level of the question he's asking in order to be able to answer that question intelligently. So when you look at the attacks of atheists against the faith, they are all childish arguments. You are looking at a second grader arguing about the faith using scientific arguments. Okay? So that's why their attack against the faith may seem intelligent, but when you peel off the layers, it is all utter childishness, okay, and lack of understanding. Okay? So please, during the break, those of you who want to buy it through the store, okay, just write down your names and then we will get it. Okay? So probably that will be our next class. How to talk to an infidel. Believe me, we have many of them in the Catholic Church. Okay. So basically, what we were looking at here in this section is the universal will of God that all be saved. And we looked at the scripture passages which attested to the fact that God wills all to be saved. And now we looked at basically church teaching, what the church has taught through the centuries. So let us just revise a predestination. Okay? So we talked about basically the monks. Okay? We talked about the priest Lycidas, who started basically misread Paul, the letter to the Romans, and then came up with the doctrine of double predestination, whereby God, without any prior consideration of what a creature does, what a human being does, has already determined some to go to heaven and others to go to hell. So regardless of what you do, if you're predestined to go to hell, however much good you do, you will go to hell. God will find a way of getting you there. If you were predestined to go to heaven, however bad you do, you will go to heaven because God will find a way of getting you there. Okay? So God has already predetermined beforehand who will be the elect, who will be saved, and who will be condemned. Then the question is, why are we wasting our time to do what we do? Why not live my life any way I want and leave it to God? Because how do I know that I'm predestined to go to heaven? Or how do I know that I'm predestined to go to hell? Okay? So let's just look at what the church basically teaches. Church teaching, the teaching of tradition on predestination. According to the Catholic faith, we also believe, this is basically the Second Council of Orange teaching in 529 AD. According to the Catholic faith, we also believe that after grace has been received through baptism, all the baptized, if they are willing to labor faithfully, can and ought to accomplish with Christ's help and cooperation what pertains to the salvation of their souls. Meaning that everybody, after receiving the grace of justification in baptism, can indeed cooperate with the help of God's grace with the grace of God to be saved. Okay? Not only do we, now listen to this statement here, not only do we not believe, okay, the Catholic Church doesn't believe this, not only do we not believe that some are predestined to evil by the divine power, but if there are any who wish to believe such an enormity, we with great abhorrence anathemize them. So the church condemns with in greatest or strongest possible terms anybody who says that God predestined or predestines some to go to hell.
It would make sense.
Okay, so the church condemns that. We also believe and profess for our salvation that in every good work, it's not we who begin and afterwards are helped by God's mercy, but He Himself who, without any previous merits on our part, first instills in us faith in Him and love for Him, so that we may faithfully seek the sacrament of baptism, and after baptism, we may with His help accomplish what is pleasing to Him. So again, this is a rejection of Pelagianism and semi-Pelagianism. Okay? Pelagianism says that we don't need grace to be saved. We just need free will. Semi-Pelagians taught that, well, we need the grace of God, but we need to decide to be saved on our own. So there is a moment in the process of salvation whereby we act without the help of God's grace, and after that, God supplies the grace. That is semi-Pelagianism. The church rejects that there is no point in our life whereby we act on our own in the direction of salvation without God helping us. In other words, we don't choose salvation. In other words, we don't move first. God offers the gift first, and then we respond. God always moves first. Okay? So it's a rejection of double predestination, according to Lycidas, and also a rejection of Pelagianism and semi-Pelagianism. Therefore, we must clearly believe that the wonderful faith of the thief who the Lord called to his home in paradise, in Luke 23, of Cornelius, the centurion, to whom the angel of the Lord was sent, Acts chapter 10, and Zacchaeus, who merited to receive the Lord himself, Luke 19, did not come from nature, but was a gift from the bounty of divine grace. God moves first. God offers the gift, and all we call faith is a response to the gift of God. So the Council of Arles had already condemned this teaching of basically this double predestination in 475 AD. The monk Gottschalk, who lived in 803 to 869. The same theory of double predestination was revived in the 9th century by a Saxon monk named Gottschalk of Olbais in the Diocese of Soissons. The local council of Carissia-Cum in 853, reacting sharply, condemned this error and emphatically affirmed that God wills the salvation of all humans without exception, although some will be lost through their own fault. Okay? So as one time Cardinal Newman said that to be a Protestant, or rather, one cannot know church history and be a Protestant. One cannot know, or rather, one cannot study church history and be a Protestant. And this is a very important thing, because look at the timeline here. In 475 AD, the church condemns the teaching of double predestination. Again, in 529, they condemned it because Lycidas was reviving it. This monk in the 9th century revives the same heresy, and the church condemns it officially for the third time. And what happened? 700 years later, Calvin revived the same heresy. Okay. And from Calvin, it really took some good root. Okay. That's why we have some Protestant traditions which still follow the Calvinistic kind of tendency, okay, from Germany. Okay, the tough, legalistic, whatever. So Calvin lived from 1509 to 1564. In the 16th century, after condemning the heresy in the 5th century, how many years later? Over 1,000 years later.
1,000.
Okay. Over 1,000 years later, Calvin, the so-called reformer, by the way, that's why we have to keep this in mind. We call these men like Martin Luther, Zwingli, Calvin reformers historically, because that period of time is called the Reformation. But there is nothing about Calvin, Zwingli, and Martin Luther that is called reform of the faith. They deformed the faith. So they should be properly called deformers of the faith, not reformers. Because listen to what Calvin teaches here, and you judge for yourself whether it is really a reform of the faith. Okay. So in the 16th century, John Calvin renewed the heresy of double predestination. His central idea was that God has created all things for his glory. Okay? So whenever you run into a Protestant who says that the Catholic Church is the Satan and the Pope is the Antichrist and you're all going to hell, okay? It may stem from the Calvinistic tendency. Okay? So the idea is God has created all things for his glory, which is true. Remember what we begin when we started this course, God created for his glory. Okay? We identified intrinsic, we made the distinction between God's intrinsic glory, which can't be increased in any way. God is omnipotent, he is full and so on. And then we talked about God's extrinsic glory. Okay? That God created for his glory. So the creation, the mountains, the hills, the forests glorify God, as we hear in Daniel. Okay? They give glory to God. And so human being gives glory to God if a human being does that for which he or she was created. So in that sense, we can say God's extrinsic glory is increased in the sense that if we do what he desires of us, his glory becomes visible. Okay? But God's intrinsic glory cannot be increased because God is omnipotent. But when creation does the will of God, then the glory of God becomes visible. So we can use the word increase in that sense. So God created to glory for his glory, which is true. But then listen to what comes next. So because he created everything for his glory, so to glorify his mercy, Calvin teaches, he predestines some to eternal life. That's good, okay? Good enough. Then hear this. To glorify his justice, he predestines others to hell. You have to know that I am God. You and you and you, hell. But God. I said, go to hell. Okay? So you see that if you present God like that to an atheist, you will be confirming his position. Because your God is foolish. Your God is unreasonable. Okay? So who would follow such a God? Who would do things in such an arbitrary manner that for no reason whatsoever you are predestined to go to heaven? For no explanation whatsoever you are predestined to go to hell. No matter what you do.
It doesn't make sense.
Okay? It doesn't make sense, but he taught it.
It's already a contradiction.
Yeah.
If he created all things for his glory,
For his glory.
he can't predestine somebody to not glorify him. End of discussion.
End of discussion, but Calvin would argue, okay, that God's justice must be glorified according to his own understanding of God's justice. So he would argue, but how is sending someone to hell a glorification of God's justice? So the question would be, what is God's justice? That you may justify sending someone to hell as a glorification of the justice of God. So some people can come up with their legalistic understanding of God, and that becomes God, but in actual fact, it's a false understanding of God, a false image of God, not the true God.
When you say with Calvinist's view of it that some people were predestined for heaven and others were predestined for hell, does that leave like a group of people in the middle that it kind of...
No, sir. No, sir. So you have to pray to God whether you're destined to go to hell or heaven.
Based on what you wrote, it does.
So it's a very, very disturbing teaching. Okay? And you wonder how any person who says they believe in God can ever teach such a thing. But it has been taught, and believe it or not, some people today in some Protestant circles still follow this way of teaching.
They believe it?
Calvinists. It spread from Germany and most especially to the US. So this, again, this is Calvin continuing to teach. This God has done antecedently to any consideration of the creature's actions, good or bad.
That doesn't make sense.
He has determined it prior to what you do or not what you do. So how would you explain Matthew 25:41 through 46? I was hungry, thirsty, naked, you came to my aid, or you didn't come to my aid. That's why the study of people like Augustine is very, very important, because they will always go back to the basics. What does divine revelation say? What did God reveal? All through scripture you see that everyone will give an account to God of their life in what we did in the flesh. So where did Calvin get this teaching from? Or the others who came before him? Where did they get their teachings from? Certainly not from what God has revealed, because we know what God has revealed. So the essence of heresy is to try to start with our own mind, okay, not with God, what God has revealed to us. So this has done antecedently to any consideration of the creature's actions, good or bad. God gives faith and virtue to the elect, okay, those who to go to heaven, to the elect, and leads them to the glory for which he has predestined them. Okay? So no matter who you are, God will find a way of giving you faith and virtue. Okay? If you are the elect. And so the Calvinists will tell you that we are the elect because God has given us faith and virtue. You are the infidels because God hasn't given you. So that's what comes next. So he denies his grace. God who wills all to be saved now denies his grace. He denies his grace to the reprobate, okay? Like Catholics, okay? You are all reprobates. You know? Very bad people. Okay. So that's what they think of us, by the way. So he denies his grace to the reprobate so that they will inevitably sin. In other words, God is leading you into sin, okay? And deserve the punishment he has justly predestined for them. So in other words, God who is willing, who can give you everything you need to go to heaven, here at this stage, he will deny you what you need. And then you progress, and over here, God will tell you, well, you don't really have the credentials. And you say, well, but God, I mean, you don't have them. But it's God himself who duped you, who refused you, who denied you those credentials.
Right.
To dupe you here that you don't have the credentials, go to hell.
So they're saying God is biased.
He's not biased according to them, he's just.
Just.
He denies you because he has to glorify his justice in you. Okay? And with you, he denies you the graces you need so that you may inevitably sin. So that when you die, he tells you, you sinned. I mean, there's nothing I can do about it. But it was he himself who denied you the grace.
Father, so if you're a Calvinist, you can do whatever you want with your life. You can murder, you can do anything you want. Anyway, you're going to go either be saved.
Well, the Calvinists will argue, okay?
Is that it?
They would argue that, well, we are the elect. So we can't do those things because God supplies faith and virtue.
So they are already predestined to go to
How
heaven.
dumb.
Yes. But the question is, if you're already predestined to go to heaven, well, why be virtuous?
Right.
So do whatever.
They will continue to say, because God has determined it. There's nothing I can do about it. Then we go back to the question, where is your free will?
No,
Are you choosing to be saved?
Or how do you know?
So you see, everything falls apart.
yeah.
Okay? Everything falls apart. Tim, you had a question?
I was going to say, how do I become a Calvinist?
You know how.
If they're predestined, then I might as well join.
Yeah. It's a very disturbing concept. But
Enjoy life.
yeah. So listen to what comes next among the Calvinists. Okay? It is important to note that some of Calvinists' later followers divided over the question. Okay? So this is a division among Calvinists. Okay? A very, very intelligent question. Okay? The question is whether God predestined the damned prior to consideration of the fall. Those who held this view were called supra-lapsarians, or only in that God condemned them only in consequence of the fall. Those who held this view were called infra-lapsarians. So the difference here is, now, we are not arguing that you Catholics are not going to hell. You're going to hell. But now as Calvinists, we are deliberating whether God made that decision prior to the fall of Adam and Eve or before the fall of Adam and Eve. And that question is very important to us. Now, did he really condemn you before the fall or after the fall? What difference? I am going to hell. I don't care whether he decided before or after the fall. I'm going to hell. So what is the question?
I have nothing better to do.
Okay. So the big question is, what difference does it make? You are damned, whether prior to the fall or after, you are going to hell.
So would the Calvinists then argue the fact that Adam and Eve were predestined to go to hell, since they sinned first and caused everything for everyone else?
That's smart.
So what would be their argument? Okay. So their argument probably would be those who say prior to the fall that they did evil, they were destined to go to hell. Okay. So that's why this Calvinism, if you really sit down and reflect on it intelligently, it basically destroys the faith. Okay. So basically, so our big question now is, what reform did Calvin bring about in terms of the faith? One time I watched a program on PBS about Martin Luther. If you knew nothing about Christianity, after that program, I think it was 2 hours, you would declare Martin Luther a saint, depending on the program. And I was just there watching the things they were saying. I was like, flat out lies. I mean, PBS has some good things, okay? But when it came to this basically they're just lies or just a twisting history. Lack of knowledge of what Christianity really is. Okay? The superficiality of the program was just dumbfounding, but they did it. Okay? So but this is not reform by any standard. It's a destruction of the faith. It's a destruction of our basically understanding of God. What kind of a God this is. But remember, the church had condemned this teaching, false teaching, 1,000 years earlier. Okay? So without mentioning Calvin by name, the Council of Trent, where was Trent? Where is Trent? New Jersey? Find out where Trent is. Okay? The Council of Trent in 1547 condemned the kind of rigid predestinarianism that Calvin was teaching at that time. Now that is the fourth time, okay, the church is officially condemning the heresy of double predestination. Okay? And the Council of Trent teaches, if anyone says that the grace of justification is given only to those who are predestined to life, and that all the others who are called indeed, but do not receive grace as they are predestined to evil by the divine power, anathema sit. You are predestined to evil by divine decree. That is dead wrong. Okay? There is no such a God who can do such a thing. Okay? Then the Jansenists. You remember Cornelius Jansen? What did he do? Don't forget these people. Okay? They are very important. Okay, the Jansenists basically severely restricted God's salvific will to the elect and taught that God denies his grace to others. In 1653, Pope Innocent X condemned the following proposition taken from Cornelius Jansenus Augustinus. Remember this man, we talked about him, that he went back to study the whole corpus of Augustine's teachings. And then in his understanding of Augustine, he came up with a body of writings called the Augustinus, okay, saying that this is what Augustine taught. But we said that when he went back to read Augustine's teachings, he basically read them with dark glasses. Okay? And so basically many of the things he says Augustine taught, Augustine didn't teach, or if he taught them, Augustine later on revised it. Okay, in what we call, during his last years, he revised many things, St. Augustine. Okay, because he taught some things when he was fighting Pelagianism, which sometimes went overboard. So during his last years, he revised some of these things. Okay, so this is basically a statement or a teaching from the Jansenists, which was rejected by the church. They claim, the Jansenists, that it is semi-Pelagian to say that Christ died or shed his blood for all men without exception. So basically the Jansenists accuse the church of being semi-Pelagian. Okay? So the Pope added, this proposition is heretical if taken in the sense that Christ died only for the predestined. 37 years later, in 1690, Pope Alexander VIII condemned the Jansenist teaching that Christ died only for the faithful, and the further proposition that pagans, Jews, and heretics receive no grace from Christ. Okay? So, just recently I was talking to you about scientists, okay, who are way up here in the knowledge of the workings of the universe, science, okay, and first grade or second grade faith. So this man is a scientist, and he came to me and we were talking about basically the faith. He's an atheist, okay? He was a Catholic. He says he doesn't believe in God. He basically started maybe during high school. And so he says, because I don't believe in the Catholic faith, I was an altar server. I don't know why they love that. I was an altar server, you know. John Kerry, when he was running for president, they're asking him about his positions on abortion or whatever. His claim was, well, I was an altar server, I know my faith. You should be embarrassed that you are an altar server and you believe that way. So this man basically was, he said, I was an altar server, but I don't believe, you know, many of the, basically what the church teaches. I said, okay, just give me an example of what you disagree with the church. Well, the church teaching that, you know, all Muslims, Hindus, whatever, will go to hell. I asked him, where did you hear that teaching? Well, the Catholic Church teaches that all the time. I said, where? I said, can you just show me a document where the Catholic Church teaches that all Muslims, all Jews, all Hindus, or whatever will go to hell? Well, that's what you teach. I said, where? Just to show me an official document.
He's not gonna find it.
So he's an atheist. He doesn't believe in, he left the Catholic Church because we teach what we condemn. Because the church officially condemns those who say that Jews, Hindus, Muslims never receive any grace from Christ. Officially, the church condemns that. Pope Alexander did that. And then they accuse us of teaching it, when in actual fact we condemn it. Okay, so second grade faith, okay? No. Okay, now let's take a break and then we'll go into theological reflection.
Glory. Glory.